Namaste and welcome to this special interaction. We have a guest today who is basically a management consultant. He has traveled a lot, not just in terms of geography, in terms of the professional experience also from startup consultancy to history rewriting. We have with us a London-based consultant and researcher, Sanket Kulkarni.
Namaste.
Namaste, Sanket ji, and thanks for sparing your time to speak to Organiser. Sanket ji, let us start first with your journey. You mainly deal with risk management and consultancy. Then, how did you get into this, archival research?
History was always the first love. History was always the first love, been the first love. But then I always wrote more than what was required in the question answer papers. My teachers kind of scolded me for that, and they kind of made me understand that you can't do a career in history. So I had to switch focus, get into computer science, finance, and the consulting journey began. But once I relocated to London, and then London is a very historic city, plus with deep connections with India, and then the old love kind of showed up again. And it was just one of the times that I thought maybe I should just go and check what is there in the British Library. That's how it all started. Really.
Why British Library? Why it is so important to understand Bharat from British? Means Dharmpalji did that. There is a legacy to this.
Firstly, few things. British Library is one of the biggest libraries in the world, potentially the largest library. Secondly, the British were our colonial masters. So they ruled India, potentially. And thirdly, they have a very good knack of keeping records. Because it's not that they just destroyed all the local records and they just kept their records. No, whatever they actually gathered is all kept here, and it's available for free. Anyone can walk in, you can browse, you are allowed to take pictures of most of the things, and the reference desks are there. They help you more than willingly. Then they have different sections. So they have rare books and manuscripts. They have newspapers. They have maps collections. They have Asian and African collections. They have the factory records and the East India Company records, and also some files from pre-independence administration of the India.
We unfortunately have created a lot of self-perception about pre-British or pre-European, pre-colonial Bharat.
Right.
As if, we were always backward, we were poor, we were, we didn't have proper system of education.
Right.
And that was one of the reasons perhaps we got colonized. That is the popular mindset. What does those records actually tell?
The records tell the story the other way around, because these guys properly planned it. I mean, they meticulously planned that they want to take over. Because the reason why I could claim this is because I came across a coin, a medal, Charles II. This was probably 1670s, and he says that the Britannia will rule over the world. So they had these intentions before. So there were very few Indian kings or rulers who realized that they had these intentions from the inset. Chhatrapati Shivaji was one of those great leaders who realized that these are not the common traders, because the idea was that they came in as traders and they bought some things, they sold some things. The business was that clear. But later on, what they started doing was they actually started establishing their territories. So territories in the sense they either gave up some, they actually started supplying weapons to the local princes, or they could actually like Clive did in Buxar. So they got the Diwani, the land revenue collection, and king was paid a fixed lump sum, and they could do whatever. So they usurped the power step by step, and without the locals noticing it. So it was not a binary change. So today it was a different king and tomorrow is different. No, this was a gradient, and over a period of time that happened, and they sucked the power from the locals, and they become.
But it was more subtle, and over the period of time. Though people generally talk about the freedom struggle from 1857 onwards. if we see right from Vasco da Gama's arrival, there were constant battles and resistance against the European colonization.
Yes.
But does British records talk about the way they changed their strategy in comparison to, say, Portuguese or French? Because in our popular, consciousness, those struggles from 1498 to 1747 almost got evaporated, and because of that, we don't have a consciousness of the way we have fought on the coastal lines.
Very true. Very true.
So does British records indicate anything about?
So the British record, I mean, the first thing that the British did not do is, of course, I mean, if you look at the Spanish or the Portuguese, they were very much, I mean, Spanish hardly were there here in India, but Portuguese, for example, they were very much religiously blinded people.
Yeah,
so the first
they were directly
Spanish
working as
representatives
of the Catholic Church. But Spanish did the same in Latin America.
Yes. So the British kind of played it subtly. The British and Dutch played it subtly. So the motto was there. The motive was there. There's a letter by Queen Victoria. So we're talking Victorian times, that on advancement of railways, the Christianity is not spread as she would have wanted. So there's a letter. So the idea was always there, but the thought came about that first let's usurp the territory. The money was the primary goal, and remember, the Brits did not go house to house and loot. That's a perception that we have, that British looted India. So they did profiteering, they did monopoly, they did all the bad business practices that are totally prohibited today. Potentially rules are created by them as well again, but then they did exactly same practices there, and they made sure that they become so powerful that even the local rulers had to go before them. So that's a difference that we don't realize. So, for example, we never had a British king, for example, like in India. We never had someone who sat on a throne of a princely state, for example. They always lived as residents. They always were the eyes, ears, and feet on the ground for the company or the British government. But they made sure that they pulled the strings whenever required and the way they were required.
1780s onwards, there seems to be a very clear-cut trend as far as British documentation and research on India is concerned.
Right.
Whether gazetteers, whether the records by various collectors and commissioners, which resulted ultimately into 1834 their minutes, which is popularly known as the
Macaulay. Yes.
And their education policy.
Right.
So what was the rationale behind that? Was it because you have been to Royal Society also, and 1824 perhaps was the year when it was started.
1794, yeah, exactly.
So what was that rationale behind studying Indian scriptures?
The idea is that if you look at the scholars, so for example, let's take William Jones. Now, William Jones is a scholar who was there in Calcutta, and he was a British. He learned Sanskrit. He was the first one to translate the Bhagavad Gita into English. He was the first one to translate Manusmriti into English. And why he was doing that was he wanted to establish the Hindu law, the Muslim law, as per the scriptures. So he wanted the company to be a good ruler. But the problem was that while they were doing it, they created divisions. That's first. And secondly, this knowledge that he had gained was misused in a way. So, for example, there's a book about adopting children. So if you look at how children could be adopted, the rules are different in South India, the rules are different in Maharashtra, rules are different in Rajasthan, despite being all Hindu adoption methods. So he made sure that he studied all those, documented all those, and later when after the company Raj was over and the British government took over, they precisely used those rules to annul states, I mean the Dalhousie policy. So the knowledge that was gathered was done in a meticulous way, in a proper way, and it was used against Bharat primarily. So,
where did this thing of language come in? Because in throughout the history, we don't see Indians fighting over linguistic identity.
No.
Even Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj reign, which was up to Tanjore,
Right.
There were multiple languages that were spoken. In fact, dialects were spoken.
Right.
And his most of his orders, popularly called as Agya Patra, They were in Modi script and Prakrit Marathi, and there were translators to just explain them. So where did it British bring in this, and how did we fall into that trap?
If you look at Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's reign, so after he was coronated in 1674. He was alive till 1680, and once he passed away from 1680 till Aurangzeb died in 1707. So we are looking at a period of about 27 years when Aurangzeb was in the Deccan. So he made sure he took over Adil Shahi, Nizam Shahi, and gave a very terrible time to the Marathas as well. The thing is that once he captured Chhatrapati Shahu and his mother and took them back to Delhi, all the linguists, the language, the court royal language again became Farsi. So the documents were always issued in Farsi. There are some British documents which are there in Farsi, and there were some titles that were issued to British officers. Like to Clive, for example, Salaman Chung and like those, and they merrily had them in their signatures. But later on, as the British became rulers, they replaced Farsi with English as they became administrators, and they never per se encouraged the linguistic identities because we had hundreds of princely states, and there was British India. So the British India had their own set languages. So they did not try to divide per se based on the language. I think it's a post-independence thought. I would believe that.
No, because it is linguistic identity is mainly European construct. They started studying Dravidian and our Indo-Aryan, and then and unfortunately in later half post 1920s, 30s, even they started making policies related to languages, and eventually Congress started making units on the basis of but good that you have mentioned about Maratha history, because that has been your forte, and you have gone through many of the documents related to Maratha history in the British records. As far as I know, in conversational Marathi, there might be references of calling Maratha Rajya or Maratha Samrajya, but when it comes to the documents, Chhatrapati Shivaji called it always Hindavi Swarajya.
Hindavi Swarajya.
Right? So, what was that point, maybe after Shivaji, that we started calling this as, because even in conversation and expeditions of Bajirao or later kingdoms, it is always Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's wisdom of Hindavi Swaraj that was reflecting.
Yes.
How come it was reduced to Maratha history?
If you look at documents, Bajirao's Peshwa's son, Nana Sahib Peshwa, he kind of quotes that, so he says that, his sentence reads as no, we are disciples of Chhatrapati Shivaji. So I'm sure he had that in mind. But once the Maratha Confederacy crossed Narmada, and they actually started capturing areas of the Sindhyas or Holkars as they went up north, then it started becoming Maratha Samraj, Maratha Confederacy, because it became a Sangha Rajya, as we could call it. So it was a confederacy. So they were paying tributes, and that's when it started changing. So I would say post 1720ish, it came into existence.
And what was this reason for capturing Delhi almost thrice?
Right.
And still not actually controlling it?
There were various reasons. So first of all was that if you look at the history, Chhatrapati Shahu was held captive by the Mughal king, and he was there for many years. So he lived in North India, so around this North Indian area. So he spent a lot of time. He had developed a sort of affection. So he grew up here. So he was always he had a soft corner for the throne, for the Mughal throne, because he kind of was raised in the same culture, and he categorically prohibited from overturning the throne, because the Mughals were a symbolic monarchy. They remained symbolic. I mean, like, Marathas were the kingmakers ultimately, and any Maratha king could, or like, people like Sardar, like Sindhiyas could just change the Mughal emperor just like that.
Maharji did that.
Maharji
Then,
did that. Yeah.
then Dattaji reached up to Delhi.
Yes.
And of course, later Nana Sahib Peshwa.
Yeah, I mean, Delhi just remained a symbolic one. I mean, if you look at it, Delhi had the Maratha flag. So when General Lake captured Delhi in 1803, Delhi had the Maratha flag. I mean, this is something that people don't realize that, or if you look at the Western historians or the British historians, they always say we captured Delhi from Mughals or the British captured it from the Mughals. But in fact, it was like, so de jure and de facto. So de facto, it was ruled from Pune and had Maratha flag back in 1803.
Ranade perhaps was the first person to actually counter it.
Yes.
So now coming to the contemporary debates, if we see the European colonization of India, Portuguese, Dutch, French, then Danes also,
Danes as well, yes.
then British came. And when it comes to British colonization, initially it may be just trade, but then it was law and education were the instruments of colonization, then religion, then actually political rule. So you see a systematic process of colonization through various instruments.
Yes.
Now, interestingly, our freedom struggle also changed the course accordingly. So initially it was, Swadeshi, Swadharma, and even Swabhasha and Rashtriya Shiksha, national education. And then came Swaraj. In fact, Swaraj came much later.
Right.
But once we attained Swaraj, why did it happen that the spirit of this entire freedom struggle that was revolving around, for example, even before Aurangzeb's demise, if there is one constant factor from 1697 to almost 1947 that resonates in Indian minds when it comes to freedom struggle was cow protection.
Right.
Every time, whether it is Punjab, whether it is, irrespective of region or caste, but suddenly these things became communal. You can't talk about, Dharma Raksha, you can't talk about cow protection, you can't talk about even Gram Swaraj has become,
I mean, Maharji kind of made a thing to have, a Jahirnama or declaration saying that the cow slaughter is banned in the Delhi area. So it was like, whoever controlled it, he could just get it done. But cow slaughter, for example, cow was always considered as a holy animal. And unless this power was attained by the Hindus, I would say, to prohibit it from doing it in the country, it was just being done. So they couldn't say, they had no say. So it just had to be done.
But in post-independent India, why do we see this, either apprehension or complete, in fact, in history, you are not supposed to talk about these issues.
True. Yes.
So why is it?
No, the problem with history is that we are cursed with selective history. The problem that we have is that there are some facts and there are some opinions. Okay, and after independence, most of the opinions were sold as facts. So the problem was that the secondary sources that we referred or that were created were specifically regarding those materials or the government's view on history, the Congress government's view on history, because they wanted to portray a particular picture about how India was in the past and how India should be in the future, because history is an instrument. It's it's an ongoing thing. So, but the problem here is that since we have lost the touch to about the real history, the facts. See, the facts must be presented and the opinions will follow. But if you skip the facts, then it's a problem. Like, for example, if you go to Germany, the Nazi bits are taught in the school. But it is taught that it was bad. What would happen was was incorrect. Here, we either completely skipped those stories, or we sugarcoated them, or we said that they did not happen. And that is that is denial. And if you are a purist or a purist historian or purist history student, that is something that you would not like. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to go study history, coming back to your first question, was this, because I thought maybe like, no, I'm in London, maybe I should go to the British Library. How about like trying to read something? And it was it was June, and I thought maybe now Shivaji Maharaj's coronation month. Why don't I go and read Henry Oxenden's diary, who was present there, for example? So it just started with that. So it was.
You have recently put a lot of documents related to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and his actual journey. Recently, in fact, last 2 days only, there has been a debate about what is called now as Myanmar.
Right.
In my childhood, at least in Marathi books, I remember call it Brahmadesh. And there was perhaps the biggest, rally that he had, and the largest contribution he received to his Indian National Army was in Rangoon.
Yes.
And later he came up to Imphal, and then till Kohima he had his followers. There were many Nagas who actually joined his army. There were many people from Madras regiment who joined army.
Yes.
And I know there are documents to believe, and even historically now fortunately they are being discussed, that it was the Indian National Army and the naval mutiny that actually resulted into we getting independence faster than expected.
Yes. The British government always was afraid of the mutinies after 1857, because 1857 taught them a lesson. I mean, if you look at it, the East India Company lost the control of Britain. If you look at the Jallianwala Bagh Hatyakand, it was also partially that. Because the Ghadar party in US, they had appealed to all the masses, the Sikhs primarily and Punjabis, to return from Canada and US, go back to Punjab, pick up arms and do an armed rebellion. That's why there was this martial law. That's why Odwar called Dyer. That's why Jallianwala Bagh, that massacre happened. And Dyer was praised.
Praised, actually.
And he was given a letter saying that he prevented another mutiny. So sort of 1857 V2. So it was always in the mind of the British government that if there's an armed rebellion, then they have nowhere to go. So Second World War was one of the big testament to that, because it was the Royal Indian Army or the Royal Indian Navy. They were fighting for the British personally. So around 1945-46, when the mutiny happened, it was a terrible time for the British to quell that, because they had no units nearby who could actually come in and control that. Subhash Chandra Bose was knocking on the eastern front there. So the timing was incorrect. And there's one more point that we usually forget is the Roosevelt, the pressure from America. Because America was an emerging economy, and they wanted to ensure that the sun on the British Empire must be set before their sun rises. So in the Yalta conference, Roosevelt personally pressurized Churchill to give up the colonies, so that London Lease programs or whatever help that United States offered to Britain and allies was based on conditions that they give up their colonies, because the US had realized that these European countries had unlimited and near zero value access to all the goods that they wanted, they needed to thrive as an economy. So it must be cut off if America were to rise. So these factors contributed. The British had no military presence left in India as such, because of the Second World War, and they had seen what Subhash Babu could do with the INA. That was a testament, what if the guns turn around. So it was primarily that kind of that must have triggered the fact that they had to withdraw. Because if you look at the freedom movements which happened, so Chhatrapati happened in 1942, independence in 1947. But if you look at Imphal, Kohima and the mutiny, they are 45, 46. So, I mean, if you can look at the chronology, you clearly see that.
You mentioned about 1674 and Shivaji Maharaj coronation. It's now 350 years to be celebrated. So, unfortunately, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, beyond a Maratha king and a contested legacy of Hindu-Muslim relationship, unfortunately, he didn't get much of credit for his vision, whether in strategic sense, whether the administrative reforms he brought, or even the the language question, the way he dealt with entire his Rajya Vyavhar Kosh. fortunately, one of the hires of Gaga Bhatt is going to be part of now Ayodhya, consecration of Ramlala, which is going to be a historical thing. But Chhatrapati Shivaji had a great legacy, and what I see, especially in the southern part also, whether you go to Tamil Nadu, Kerala, still there are many places and monuments and where people have high regard about Chhatrapati Shivaji's contribution, but still it is not reflected in the intellectual, historical, political sense.
Right.
Why is it so, and what can be done about it?
So Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, I mean, just to take a step back, he was the first leader who actually thought about the problem of the whole 360 way. Because instead of thinking about how great Shivaji Maharaj was, if we start thinking about how small Shivaji Maharaj was and how bigger enemies it took on. So if you look at Adil Shah versus his size, if you look at Mughals versus his size, and of course Qutub Shah was there, but he fought an alliance with them. So that was a diplomatic win as well. So if you think about the courage of that man to take on big enemies, and the other thing, so for example, he is someone who is praised even by his enemies. So for example, the Mughal courtier Kafi Khan praises Shivaji about his conduct, for example. Or the Brits kind of were afraid of him. The Portuguese compared him with Caesar or Alexander. Dutch did the same, and they were terrified as well. Because Surat or because of the Shaista Khan episode, he could fly, he could appear from anywhere, he could go through a wall or whatever. So those sort of things. And importantly, this guy had a very good credential when it came to whatever he thought was basically belonged or was from India. So basically, the values of the land, he saw them very clearly. He saw things as things which belong to India, belong to Bharat, the tradition, versus the invaders. So it was clear to him that way. So that's why whenever it came to, so for example, there was a Saptakoteshwar Mandir in Goa that he actually he rebuilt it. Some temples in South India he rebuilt it. So anything foreign, anything that suppressed the local, the Bharatiya Samaj or the society, he just made sure that he stood up against that. So this applies to language as well. Around the time when Shivaji Maharaj was born, a typical letter, Marathi letter, would contain around 90% Farsi words. So, I mean, that was the driver to create Rajya Vyavhar Kosh. And, I mean, he was so visionary that around the time Peshwai ended, so decline 1818s, the Farsi word count had dropped to nearly around 10% or so. So, I mean, this is not accurate statistics, but 90% to 5-10%. So, he was the element, or he was the trigger that actually got the ball rolling. And then coronation was a very important ceremony to conduct, because that created a seat of the Marathi power, seat of the Hindu power. Because the thing was that he did not want it to be coronated and call me king or I become Chhatrapati. No, there was a thought behind that, because once there is a seat, then you are not actually fighting for a person, you are actually fighting for that seat, the soul, cause. The seat is the cause. That cause gets established, and then the baton gets passed.
That is perhaps the reason why after Chhatrapati Shivaji's demise, almost 140 years, even after that, or up to 1857, it was a kind of inspiration for everybody to fight for Swaraj.
Yes.
But again, going back to the archives and entire project of history rewriting, now what are the areas, what can be done to because 350 years is an occasion where we can revisit the history and contribution and re-establish Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's legacy.
Yes.
So what can be done about your experience of going through those archives? What?
No, I mean, before pre-independence, primarily the history was researched and written because the historians had this was their agenda, or they had a task at hand, that they wanted to prove that we are not worthless. Because the British always tried to push that you are worthless. So you lost Panipat first, you lost Panipat 2, you lost Panipat 3, you lost at Plassey, so you are losers.
You are a defeated civilization.
Yes. And you are not fit to rule. So we are just taking over, and we are helping you by doing that. So be thankful.
Culturally, educationally, technologically,
backward. We are superior, and just copy us. and copy your values, copy your society, copy your culture. Yours doesn't matter. But the thing is that when it comes to re-establishing what the vision of Shivaji Maharaj, or if we were to go back to the documents and things, then we must reassess Swadharma, Swabhasha, and Swarajya. So the three principles that he fought for, or he stood for. So that's a very important task.
See, but now there is a very interesting trend that we are seeing. Of course, there are some established historians who are going through the original archives, getting into documents and retelling the history of Bharat from, rather I would say, Itihasa of Bharat from Bharatiya point of view. But there are many who are not actually coming from history background, still getting into it and creating.
Let me take it on me, because I am not from history or the academic history background. I purely took it up as my own interest. So the thing is that I think, this is again my opinion, I think that the problem with the people with history background or history academia is that the books or the materials that they have studied are secondary or tertiary sources, and which are written with some thought in mind, or some political agenda, or opinionated, or there could be various reasons. Printing was expensive, so let's say a 200 page or 500 page manuscript is being translated, and if the translator feels that 50 pages are not important, you just skip it, because that reduces 50 pages and printing becomes cheaper, for example. Or he would think that if I print it, it could cause a ruckus. Let's skip that. Or he could think that if I print this, or if I translate this, there could be a political revenge taken against me. So he would just skip it. So this was the issue, and this should not continue. So that's why I think that we should go back.
So the issue of political correctness and incorrectness was always there.
Yes, it was always there. Because the thing was that people always wanted to portray Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj as a secular king. Okay. Now, secular is a definition which was formed in around 19th century England. That cannot be applied to a 17th century Hindu Marathi king. Because back in those times, the times were different, the society was different, the causes that he was fighting was different. So you can't really take something from the 19th century and stick to someone from 17th century. That is absolutely incorrect. The scales are different. You can't measure water with meters, for example. So that's totally a no-no. And then later on, as we look at post-independence India, the historians or the material that we have available for the academia is opinionated, as you said. So we must make a conscious effort to go back to the manuscripts, try and rewrite, try and refine what we have. Because see, there is nothing wrong. So for example, let's say someone missed or skipped 50 pages in the translation. It's absolutely fine to add it, new edition. Or someone did something wrong. We want scholars to come ahead, and set it right. Or someone translated something incorrectly, then set it right. So the rework must happen, but based on primary sources.
And so what should be the, this is a very good occasion, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj 350 years. We are in a way, getting into new kind of churning about ourselves. This 75 years of India's independence has a lot of, created a lot of curiosity among the younger generation. So what would you suggest them, to how to go about, whether you are academically historian or not, how should you approach history? And
firstly, history should be always written with references. History should not be emotions. You are not allowed to choose sides when you are reading or writing history. That's one thing. There should not be any hidden undercurrents or reading between the lines that you want to pass on, or you should not be passing your opinions as facts. That's a key thing. That must happen. And there should be a system to protect who do that. Because currently, if you look at it, if I want to write some facts about X, I won't take names, but then if they are not convenient facts, then suddenly there will be uproar against me. I may not ever come to India. so that sort of thing. So there has to be a protection. So it will happen. It will happen because education will eventually do it, because people will realize that this was history. They were all men. Because another thing that we have in India is that we actually establish, or we make historical figures into godmen, and then suddenly godmen can't have any drawbacks, or they can't have any negative points. Or if you write something historically accurate but emotionally incorrect, then it's a problem.
So we have had a very catching informal conversation with Sanket Kulkarni about history, his journey, and what we can do for future project of telling Itihasa from Bharatiya point of view. Thank you, Sanketji, for joining this conversation.
Namaste.